Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving deep today into Bharat Dynamics Limited. You might know them as BDL. And we've got a pretty big stack of reports here. Financial reports, stock analyses, company announcements, all sorts of stuff to sift through.
It's a lot of data.
It is. But don't worry, even if you're not, a finance whiz or anything like that, we're going to uncover the story, the narrative behind the numbers. And trust me, this is going to be a really interesting one. We're talking, guided missiles, underwater weapons, all that defense tech stuff. BDL's right in the thick of it, and they've been making headlines lately.
They have. It's a company a lot of people are watching.
So let's just get right to it. As of November 18th, 2024, BDL share price is down like 3.12%, down to like 959. What do you make of that? Is that like a big red flag?
Well, it's definitely a dip, but I think if we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, we have to look at the past year. BDL's stock has actually seen a huge increase over the past year. Their one-year CAGR, that's the compound annual growth rate, is 76%. That basically means if you had invested in BDL a year ago, your investment would have grown by 76%.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
76%.
Yeah.
That's a huge return.
It is.
But, I mean, if we're being honest, it sounds like it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride. You mentioned it went from 1,795 to 542 at one point.
Yeah.
So what's driving that kind of volatility? I mean, what explains that?
Well, the defense sector, it's inherently tied to a lot of things that are kind of out of the company's control, geopolitical events, government policies, global conflicts, all of that can cause these, really big swings in the market.
That's true. That makes sense. So let's get a little more into like their overall financial health. Their revenue for the year ending March 31st, 2024 was 236.93 crores. I mean, is that good? Is that bad? I don't know what to make of that number.
Yeah. It's hard to say without context, right? We need to look at the trend, over the past few years. How has that number been changing? And even more important than that, I think, are the quarterly reports. They give us a much closer look at sort of the ebb and flow of their finances.
So let's unpack those quarters then. I mean, did anything stand out to you when you were looking through those numbers? Did anything jump out?
Well, their revenue definitely fluctuates quite a bit. And what's really interesting is how closely it's tied to, like the timing of major contracts and deliveries. So, for example, the quarter ending in June 2024, they had a relatively low revenue, like 191 crores. But then the September quarter saw a huge jump. They went up to 545 crores.
Wow. So it sounds like landing those big contracts is really crucial for BDL. But where do they fit, like, within the overall Indian defense industry? Are they a major player?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're definitely one of the leading players. And they're really well positioned to benefit from the government's push for self-reliance in defense production. They want to, rely less on foreign companies and more on domestic companies like BDL.
Okay, interesting. So they've got the government's back in there. And speaking of stability, let's talk about debt.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that they're pretty much debt-free. Why is that such a big deal?
Yeah. Being debt-free, it's a huge advantage, especially in an industry like defense that requires so much capital investment. Think of it like running a marathon without carrying any extra weight. It gives them a lot of flexibility and makes them less vulnerable to like economic downturns.
That's a great analogy. I like that.
Yeah.
And they're also paying dividends.
Yeah.
What did that tell us?
Yeah. Their current dividend yield is 0.52%. Now, on the surface, that might not sound like a lot, but for a company that's debt-free in such a, volatile sector, it actually speaks volumes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It shows they're committed to returning value to shareholders, and it also indicates like a confidence in their future earnings.
Okay, so they're financially pretty solid, it sounds like. That's reassuring. But obviously no company operates in a vacuum. So what kind of external factors are impacting BDL's performance?
Well, I think the big one that everybody's been talking about is these global supply chain disruptions. The Russia-Ukraine war and the conflicts in the Middle East have been causing problems for everybody, BDL included.
Yeah. And their September 2024 report specifically mentions delays in receiving essential input materials. How badly has this affected their operations?
It's hard to quantify exactly, but it's definitely contributed to some of the, volatility we see in their quarterly results. There have been projects that have been delayed, which obviously has a ripple effect on their financial performance.
And they said in that report that they expect those supply chain issues to be resolved by the second half of the fiscal year. I mean, is that realistic?
It's really hard to say. I mean, the geopolitical landscape is constantly changing. These kinds of disruptions can have, really long-lasting impact.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now, another thing that kind of stood out to me is they've got this like pile of inventory. It's like 83.39 crores that's been sitting there for over 5 years. What's going on with that?
Yeah, that was interesting. It looks like it's tied to orders that were, they use this term short closed by a customer, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term.
No, no.
It basically means they had customer, in this case, it sounds like a government entity. They placed an order, but then they, for whatever reason, they decided to shorten that order. So that left BDL with this excess inventory.
Okay, so that explains the stagnant inventory.
Yeah.
But why is that a red flag? Why should I care?
Well, it raises some questions about their inventory management practices. Ideally, companies don't want to have a lot of capital tied up in inventory that's just sitting there.
Right.
It's not really doing anything for them.
So how big of a problem is this really?
I mean, it's something they need to address. They could try to, repurpose the inventory for other projects, or maybe they could find new buyers. But the key is going to be, minimizing those losses and making sure it doesn't become a recurring problem.
Now, on a more positive note, they're part of this new joint venture to develop defense testing infrastructure in India.
Yeah, that's an interesting development. They'll have a 20% share in the venture, and they're putting in 2.99 crores.
What do you make of that move?
Well, I think it's a smart strategic move. It allows them to diversify their revenue streams. So instead of just, manufacturing and selling weapons, they're now involved in, testing phase, which is a crucial part of the whole defense industry.
Yeah, that's a good point. And speaking of growth, I mean, the Indian defense sector as a whole, I mean, that's expected to grow a lot in the coming years. So what does that mean for BDL?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back to discuss BDL's future in this booming Indian defense market. Don't go anywhere.
BDL's in a really good spot to capitalize on all this growth. They've got, strong track record. They've got those established relationships with the Indian Armed Forces. And as we've been talking about, they've got that government support for domestic defense manufacturing.
Yeah. No, it sounds really promising. But, I mean, are there any potential downsides for BDL in the long term? I mean, what should investors be wary of?
Well, the potential rewards are definitely, substantial. As India continues to modernize its military, BDL is going to be right there. They're going to be in a great position to secure those, big contracts. But the biggest risk, I think, for a company like BDL is political risk.
Yeah, right. India's defense policies, I mean, they can change with different administrations, and that would have a direct impact on BDL.
Exactly. So while, BDL is in a sector that's considered essential for national security, investors need to understand that they're still subject to political decision making.
Right. That's a really important point for anyone who's thinking about, maybe putting some money into BDL. It's a good reminder that even companies with, strong financials, they're not immune to these external factors.
Yeah.
Now, how has the Russia-Ukraine war directly affected BDL?
Well, as we talked about earlier, it's been disrupting those global supply chains, and BDL has definitely felt that impact. They rely on certain components, materials, that are sourced from countries that are being affected by the conflict. And so, those supply lines have been disrupted. It's been causing delays, driving up costs.
So it's not just about, BDL's ability to manufacture. It's also about, their access to the raw materials.
Exactly. And in their recent reports, they've acknowledged that the supply chain issues have put pressure on their production timelines and their profitability. They've even had to, renegotiate some contracts because of these delays.
Wow. So this international conflict is having very real consequences for a company, half a world away.
Yeah.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is,
Absolutely. And it underscores the need for companies like BDL to, to diversify their sourcing. Maybe they could look for alternative suppliers in different regions that might help to, mitigate some of those risks.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, what about innovation? Are they investing in new technologies to kind of stay ahead of the curve?
They are. BDL has been really active in research and development, particularly in areas like missile technology, and unmanned systems, or working on things like advanced guidance systems, propulsion systems. They're even looking at AI, artificial intelligence, in their products.
AI in guided missiles. That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It might sound futuristic, but it's becoming a reality. The integration of AI into defense systems, it's a major trend. And BDL is positioning themselves to be a leader in the space. They know that to stay competitive, they have to, constantly innovate and adapt to the changing demands of modern warfare.
So they're not just making missiles, they're making smarter missiles. Which kind of brings us back to that relationship with the Indian government. How does that dynamic work, and what are the implications for BDL?
Well, as we know, BDL's main customer is the Indian Armed Forces. So that relationship with the government is absolutely critical. The government's defense policies, procurement priorities, budgetary allocations, all of that has a direct impact on BDL's business.
Right. So they're essentially reliant on government contracts. How stable is that revenue stream?
I mean, generally, it's considered a stable revenue stream, given the government's commitment to strengthening India's defense capabilities. But as we've talked about, those political factors can always introduce a level of uncertainty.
Right. Right. It sounds like BDL needs to kind of walk this tightrope. They have to, cater to the government's requirements while also anticipating future needs and staying ahead of those technological advancements.
Exactly, and that's where their focus on R&D and building those strategic partnerships becomes so important. They need to show that they can not only meet current demands, but they can also anticipate and provide solutions for future challenges.
Now, what about international collaborations? Do they partner with any foreign companies?
They do. They do. They've been actively seeking out collaborations, particularly with companies that have expertise in those advanced technologies. These partnerships give them access to cutting-edge technology. They allow for knowledge sharing, and they can potentially open doors to new markets.
So they're not just focused on the domestic market. They're looking to expand their global footprint as well.
Exactly. In recent years, they've signed agreements with companies from Israel, from Russia, from France. These partnerships focus on things like missile development, technology transfer, joint production.
It sounds like a win-win for both sides.
Yeah.
BDL gets access to new technologies, new markets, and their foreign partners, they get to benefit from BDL's manufacturing capabilities and their knowledge of the Indian market.
Exactly. These partnerships are essential for BDL to stay competitive on that global scale.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at their financials, their debt, their dividends, the challenges they're facing. We've also looked at their growth strategy, their relationship with the Indian government, these international partnerships. Where does all this leave us? Well, what does all this mean for BDL's future prospects?
Well, I think overall BDL has a lot of potential. They're a key player in a market that's growing rapidly. They've got strong financials, and they're actively investing in innovation, in building those strategic partnerships.
Yeah, that does paint a pretty positive picture. But I mean, for those of us who are maybe thinking about investing, what should we be watching out for? What are the key indicators of BDL's success going forward?
Well, there's a few things to keep an eye on. First, can they overcome those supply chain issues? Those are still a major hurdle. Second, are they securing new contracts, both domestically and internationally? That's going to be a key indicator of their growth. And third, are they successfully developing and commercializing these new technologies, especially in areas like, AI and unmanned systems? That's where the future is heading.
So it's all about execution now. They've got the potential, but can they actually deliver?
Exactly. And that's what's going to determine their long-term success.
Now, you mentioned their manufacturing capabilities. Where are their facilities located, and what kind of capacity do they have?
They have several manufacturing facilities across India, but their main production units are in Hyderabad, Telangana, and Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh. These facilities are, they're equipped to handle the production of a whole range of defense products, missiles, torpedoes, rockets, the whole shebang.
And what about their workforce? How many people do they employ, and what kind of expertise are we talking about here?
Well, they have a large workforce of skilled engineers, technicians, support staff, and they really emphasize training and development to make sure their employees stay up to date on the latest, knowledge and skills.
Okay. So they're investing in their people as well, which, as we all know, that's essential for long-term growth and innovation. Sustainability is a big topic these days. What is BDL doing to make sure that their operations are environmentally responsible?
Yeah. That's an important question. They've have acknowledged the importance of environmental sustainability, and they've implemented a number of initiatives to reduce their environmental footprint. They're focusing on things like, energy efficiency, waste reduction, the responsible disposal of hazardous materials.
So they're taking concrete steps to minimize their impact.
They are. They're also, looking at renewable energy sources in their facilities, which I think is a positive step.
Yeah, no, that's good. Now, switching gears a bit, how does BDL make sure that their products meet, the highest standards of quality and reliability? I mean, we're talking about defense systems here.
Yeah, absolutely. Quality control is paramount. They have a really rigorous quality management system that covers every aspect of their operations, from the design and development to the production to the testing. Their facilities are all certified to international quality standards, and they have a, dedicated team of quality control professionals who are making sure that, every product meets those strict requirements of the Indian Armed Forces.
So no cutting corners when it comes to quality.
Absolutely not. They understand that lives depend on the reliability of their products, and they've really built a strong culture of quality within the organization.
Okay, good. So who are their main rivals in the Indian defense market, and how do they stack up against them?
Well, they face competition from both, domestic and international players. In India, their main competitors are companies like Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, HAL, Larsen& and Toubro, or L&T, and Farhat Electronics Limited,
Yeah.
BAL.
Okay. And how does BDL differentiate itself from these companies? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses?
Well, I think their main strength is in their expertise in missile technology. They have that long-standing relationship with the Indian Armed Forces, and they have a, proven track record of delivering high-quality missile systems. They also have a really deep understanding of the Indian military's specific needs, what they're looking for.
Okay. So they've got the expertise, they've got the connections. What about weaknesses? Where might they be vulnerable?
Well, one potential weakness is their, reliance on the Indian government for a significant portion of their revenue. As we talked about earlier, that dependence on government contracts can be a bit risky. If there are any shifts in defense policies or budget allocations, it could have a big impact on them.
So diversifying their customer base would be a smart move.
Absolutely. Expanding into international markets, securing contracts from foreign governments, that would lessen their reliance on any single customer. And it would give them a more stable, more predictable revenue stream.
Right, right. Now, what are some of the emerging trends and technologies that are going to shape the Indian defense industry in the coming years? And how is BDL preparing for these changes?
Well, the Indian defense industry is going through this period of rapid transformation, driven by the government's push for self-reliance in defense manufacturing. Their increasing focus on modernization and the emergence of all these new technologies.
So it's a really dynamic, exciting time for the industry.
It is. And BDL is definitely aware of these changes. They're investing in R&D to create, next generation defense systems, things like, hypersonic missiles, unmanned aerial vehicles, advanced radar systems.
So they're not resting on their laurels. They're actively pursuing these new technologies.
Exactly. They're also, focusing on building those strategic partnerships, both domestically and internationally, to gain access to these new technologies and expand their capabilities.
So it's a multifaceted approach to ensure their future success.
It is. It is.
Now, how does BDL's performance and growth contribute to India's overall national security and strategic objectives?
Well, I think BDL plays a really crucial role in strengthening India's defense capabilities. Their work helps to reduce India's dependence on foreign suppliers for critical military equipment. Being able to design, develop, and manufacture these advanced weapon systems domestically, it gives India a greater, autonomy and control over its own security.
So they're not just a company, they're a strategic asset for the nation.
Exactly. Their contributions go beyond, just economic benefits. They directly impact India's ability to defend its interests and maintain its standing on the world stage.
That's a really powerful statement. Now, what are the specific factors that make BDL, an attractive investment opportunity, or maybe even unattractive?
Yeah.
Let's look at it from both sides.
Yeah, I mean, from an investor standpoint, BDL presents the mix of potential rewards and risks. On the positive side, they operate in a sector that's projected to experience substantial growth in the coming years. That the growth is being fueled by India's expanding defense budget and their ambitious modernization plans.
Right. So the market fundamentals look pretty good. What about the risks? We've touched on some of them, but it's always good to have a clear picture.
Yeah. I mean, as with any investment, there are risks to consider. For BDL, I'd say some of the key risks include, their dependence on those government contracts, the potential for delays in project execution, and of course, competition from both domestic and international players.
Yeah.
So investors need to carefully weigh those risks against the potential rewards before making any decisions.
Right, right. Now they're virtually debt free,
Right.
which is a big plus. But what about their profitability and cash flow? How efficient are they at managing their finances and generating those returns for investors?
Well, they've generally maintained a healthy level of profitability and cash flow. If you look at their financial reports, it shows that they're pretty efficient at converting revenue into profits,
Mhm.
and they're managing their working capital, effectively.
Okay, so they're not just growing, they're growing profitably.
Exactly. And that strong cash flow position gives them a lot of flexibility to invest in those growth initiatives, in research and development, and even, in strategic acquisitions.
Now, what about their dividend policy? We know that they have a history of paying dividends, but what's their approach and what can investors expect, going forward?
Well, they've demonstrated a commitment to delivering value to shareholders through those consistent dividend payments. They've maintained a pretty stable dividend payout ratio over the past few years, and their current dividend yield is actually quite attractive compared to a lot of other companies in the defense sector. So I think investors can reasonably expect a steady stream of income from their BDL investments.
Okay, good. Now, how does BDL's role in India's defense sector, how does that contribute to the country's economic growth and its strategic position in the region?
Well, BDL's growth and success have this ripple effect on the Indian economy. They create jobs, they support local suppliers, and they contribute to technological advancements within the country.
So they're not just a defense company, they're an engine of economic growth.
Exactly. And their role in strengthening India's defense capabilities also, enhances the country's strategic position in the region.
Right.
As India looks to assert itself as a major power, a strong domestic defense industry like BDL is absolutely essential.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, what about their corporate governance? What are the key aspects of their governance structure, and how do they ensure transparency and accountability?
Well, BDL being a government-owned company, they adhere to the corporate governance guidelines that are set by the Indian government. They have a board of directors that oversees the company's operations and makes sure that, they're compliant with all the applicable laws and regulations.
Okay, so they've got a robust governance framework in place.
They do. And they also have various committees like, the audit committee, the nomination and remuneration committee. And these committees provide, independent oversight and ensure that the company's interests are being protected.
Now, let's talk about the ethical aspects of their business. Defense companies, they often face scrutiny, regarding the potential impact of their products. So how does BDL address those concerns, and how do they make sure that their operations are conducted ethically and responsibly?
Well, BDL operates within the framework of India's defense policies and international norms.
Hmm.
Their products are designed for defensive purposes,
Yeah.
and they're supplied to the Indian Armed Forces to safeguard the nation's security.
So they're committed to using their technology for legitimate defense purposes.
Yeah. They are. And they have internal policies and procedures in place to make sure that their operations are carried out in accordance with ethical principles and international humanitarian law.
Okay, that's good to hear. Now, what are some of their flagship products, and what are their key features, their capabilities?
Well, they have a really diverse portfolio of defense products.
Mhm.
Some of their most notable offerings include the Akash surface-to-air missile system, the Prithvi short-range ballistic missile, and the Astra beyond visual range air-to-air missile.
Okay. And what are the unique selling points of these products? What sets them apart from the competition?
Well, these missile systems are known for their accuracy, their reliability, and their advanced technological features. They've been designed to meet the specific requirements of the Indian Armed Forces, and they have a proven track record of effectiveness in various tests and exercises.
So they're high performance systems that give India a technological edge.
They do. And importantly, they're also competitively priced, compared to similar systems that are offered by those international defense companies.
Yeah, okay. Now, are there any plans for upgrades or new product development in the pipeline for these specific products?
Oh, absolutely. BDL is constantly working to improve and upgrade its existing products, and they're always developing, new systems to meet the evolving needs of modern warfare. They're investing heavily in R&D to enhance the range, the accuracy, the lethality of their missiles, and they're exploring, those new technologies like hypersonic capabilities and even further integration of artificial intelligence. So they're
Yeah.
definitely committed to staying ahead of that technological curve.
Yeah. Now, how do they promote their products? How do they secure these big contracts, both domestically and internationally? What's their marketing and sales strategy like?
Well, their primary customer is the Indian government. So they have this well-established relationship with the Ministry of Defense and the Indian Armed Forces. They participate in, defense exhibitions, trade shows to showcase their products, connect with potential customers.
And what about internationally? How are they approaching those opportunities?
Well, they've been actively pursuing international collaborations and partnerships to kind of expand their reach into those global markets. They're participating in, international defense exhibitions, engaging with foreign governments, defense agencies, and exploring, joint ventures, technology transfer agreements with international companies. So they're definitely taking a proactive approach to secure a foothold in the international market.
Right, right. Now, what are the key regulations and policies that kind of govern BDL's operations? And how do they make sure that they're in compliance?
Well, they operate in a very tightly regulated environment,
Right.
governed by both Indian laws and international agreements. They comply with, export control regulations, arms trade treaties, all those other relevant policies to make sure that, their products are being used responsibly and ethically.
So they're not just focused on profits. They're also committed to upholding these high standards of compliance and ethical conduct.
Absolutely. And they understand that maintaining that reputation for responsible behavior is really crucial for their long-term success and their credibility in the global defense industry.
Right. Now, what are the biggest threats to their business, both in the short term and the long term?
Well, I think one of the most significant risks is the potential for delays in project execution.
Right.
The defense industry is known for these complex projects, and delays can, lead to cost overruns and impact profitability. So project management is absolutely crucial for their success.
Right. And what about other risks? What else should they be watching out for?
Well, another significant risk is the potential for changes in government policies or defense budgets. As we've discussed, they're heavily reliant on those government contracts, and any shifts in government priorities could have a major impact on their revenue stream.
So they need to be adaptable.
Yeah.
They need to be agile and respond to those changes.
Exactly. And they also need to, continue their efforts to diversify their customer base and explore those opportunities in international markets to reduce their reliance on any single customer.
Right. Now, what are their plans for expansion and diversification?
Yeah.
And how are they positioning themselves for future success?
Well, they've laid out a pretty ambitious growth strategy that focuses on both, organic expansion and strategic acquisitions. They're investing in new facilities, expanding their product portfolio,
Yeah.
exploring, joint ventures and partnerships to gain access to new technologies and new markets.
Okay. So they're taking a multifaceted approach to growth.
They are. They understand that to remain competitive in the long term, they need to continuously innovate, expand their capabilities, and adapt to the ever-changing dynamics of the global defense market.
Now, how does the company engage with local communities? And what steps are they taking to make sure that their activities benefit society as a whole?
Mm.
And what about their social impact?
Well, they recognize the importance of corporate social responsibility, and they've implemented a variety of initiatives to give back to the community. They support education and healthcare programs, they contribute to disaster relief efforts,
Hmm.
and they promote environmental sustainability in their operations.